It was 12:30 a.m. outside Moscow when the sky suddenly turned white. A single explosion ripped through the quiet Russian countryside, a blast so violent it could be seen from miles away. Within seconds, flames rose hundreds of feet into the fog, painting the night like daylight. But this wasn't just any explosion. This was Russia's $3 billion oil lifeline, gone in an instant. The pipeline that kept Moscow's tanks fueled, its jets in the air, and its war machine alive had just been blown apart. At first, no one understood what had happened. Russian commanders thought it was sabotage, maybe an accident, maybe an internal failure. But when intelligence confirmed what struck them, a single Ukrainian drone, disbelief turned into humiliation. Because this wasn't some high-tech billion-dollar missile, it was a $12,000 home-built drone made with off-the-shelf parts and a pilot sitting hundreds of miles away. The question now spreading across Moscow's military networks was simple. How did a flying lawnmower slip through one of the world's most advanced defense systems and hit the heart of Russia's war economy? The answer begins weeks before the explosion, with a plan so bold, so surgical, it turned modern warfare on its head. To understand the scale of this strike, you have to know what was destroyed. Running from the oil fields of Ryazan straight into the heart of Moscow is a 120-mile artery of steel, the Ryazan-Moscow pipeline. It pumps over 1 million barrels of fuel every single day. Gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. Enough to keep Russia's army rolling and its jets in the air non-stop. It's not just a pipeline, it's the bloodstream of the Russian war machine. For years, Moscow believed this lifeline was untouchable, protected by dense forests, hidden bunkers, and guarded by the most expensive air defense network on Earth, the S-400s, the Pantsers, and electronic warfare systems so powerful they could blind enemy satellites. To Putin, it was a symbol of control, a reminder that no matter what happened at the front lines, Moscow's heart would keep pumping. But to Ukraine, it was something else entirely, a single point of failure. If that artery could be cut, even for a few days, tanks would stop, jets would stay grounded, and Russia's southern front would choke. And so deep inside a dark room in Kyiv, a small group of Ukrainian engineers began to study this pipeline like surgeons preparing for open-heart surgery. Every bend, every weak point, every possible blind spot was mapped out. Because if you want to take down a giant, you don't hit him in the chest, you find his pulse and stop it. They didn't stumble onto this by accident. What looks like a lucky hit was actually the final move of a chess game that began weeks earlier. In a cramped planning room in Kyiv, a small team of analysts and engineers treated the Ryazan-Moscow pipeline like a map of an enemy heart, tracing every bend, every service road, every place the defenses might be blind. They weren't aiming to win a firefight, they were aiming to make the enemy look in the wrong direction. The playbook was simple in idea, but ruthless in execution. Create a spectacle loud enough to drag every sensor and interceptor toward obvious threats, then slip a ghost through the gap left behind. Cheap decoys would scream and burn at the edges. Long-range attacks would force the big anti-air batteries to light up. Meanwhile, a carefully placed low-profile asset would slip in under the curtain of noise and hit the real prize, a single weak section of pipeline that, if breached, would ripple through Russia's logistics. Reports after the strike showed coordinated attacks on fuel infrastructure and refineries across the region, which fits the picture of distraction and simultaneous pressure. This wasn't improvisation. Satellites, open-source tracking, and battlefield surveillance narrowed down vulnerable points. Human intelligence and engineers turned those points into a surgical target. The objective wasn't to destroy as much hardware as possible. It was to break a vital link, create chaos in supply lines, and deliver a political and psychological message that said, even your most trusted lifelines are vulnerable. The result wasn't just fire and metal. It was a strategic wound that echoed far beyond the blast zone. At 11:15 p.m., the sky began to sound like a war drum. Not one, but dozens of tiny silhouettes rose from the west, cheap plywood frames and foam bodies, the kind of drones your enemy expects to ignore. They screamed toward the border like a flock of angry birds, burning bright and loud until the night was full of tracer fire and smoke. Their mission wasn't to survive, it was to make noise, to explode where everyone could see, and to force the Guardians to show their hand. Across the region, bigger threats were pushed into the spotlight. Long-range drones and missiles pounding refineries and fuel depots. The S-400s and Pantsers woke up from their quiet posts and lit the sky with missiles, while electronic warfare systems tried to blank out every signal. Command centers buzzed with false alarms and flashing contacts. Every interceptor that could spin up, spun up. And that was the point. While Russia's best systems chased the obvious, the planners in Kyiv were watching how the web of defenses moved, what rotated toward the loudest smoke, where the gaps opened up. They didn't need to overwhelm the enemy with force. They only needed to shape his attention. The decoys bought a handful of minutes that mattered, a messy, visible theater that let something much quieter crawl through the back door. Reports after the operation would tie these explosions and the refinery hits to a coordinated campaign of distraction and pressure, simultaneous strikes across several regions that overwhelmed air defenses and drew resources away from the real prize. They rolled a miracle into the forest in the most ordinary package imaginable, a beat-up, unmarked panel truck that looked like it belonged to a bakery. Inside, though, it carried something far from bread. 2 quiet killers and a crew that treated silence like a weapon. This truck wasn't flashy. That was the point. If you want to hide in plain sight, you dress like everyone else. The operators waited in the dark while the decoys screamed and the big defenses danced. Their control link was the one thing the whole plan hinged on, not because it was explosive, but because it was invisible. When the moment came, one drone slid out without ceremony, disappearing into the fog like a ghost. The pilot's whole world collapsed to a tiny screen and the soft hum of a motor. No blaring radar, no thunderous rocket, just the slow, cold business of getting to a single point on a pipe and making a single choice count. By design, the truck turned the battlefield into a chessboard. Every minute it sat there was a risk, every second it moved was a gamble. The team had traded firepower for stealth and precision, and if the plan worked, the payoff would be more than metal and money. It would be a message. But the hunter was not blind. He was only patient. The first drone was a blur of nerves and terrain-hugging flight, skimming treetops while a Russian recon drone hunted above. For a heartbeat, it felt like watching 2 shadows chase the same ghost, one flying low in the trees, the other searching from high. Missiles screamed, warning lights flared, and for a moment it seemed the mission would die in the mud. Then something broke. Not just the fragile cable tethering the operator to his bird, but a line that told the defenders exactly where to look. The launch site lit up on their screens. The trap was closing. The crew in the truck had seconds to decide between abandoning everything or doubling down on the gamble. They doubled down. In a move that ignored every tired rule of caution, the team forced a second launch while the vehicle itself was moving, a desperate, chaotic flight that would have failed for most. The drone wobbled, fought for balance, and slowly steadied. What looked like madness was actually controlled chaos, a last raw attempt to keep the plan alive even as the noose tightened. The chase across the field became a test of nerves. Recon planes swept and ground units converged. For the pilot, it was a single-minded run through a narrow corridor of danger. Push the bird low, push it hard, and hope the timing you've rehearsed on a map survives the noise of a real night. And when the second drone finally cleared the trees and found the open line of the pipeline, the defenders realized with cold clarity that they had been played. What happened when that second drone hit the pipe changed everything. The second drone steadied in the fog like a predator finding sight of its prey. It carried a tiny, surgical warhead, 2 pounds, precisely shaped, but the true weapon was the timing. Flying just feet above the ground, it rode the dark like a whisper, slipping through the holes the decoys had carved in the defenses. When it hit, it didn't just punch a hole. The shaped charge ripped open the pipeline, instantly aerosolizing a column of high-pressure fuel. In an instant, the night became day. A fireball shot 300 feet into the sky, followed by a rolling shockwave that tore at the steel skin for 200 feet. The blast didn't merely damage metal, it turned a sealed artery into an open wound, and the fire fed itself on the endless torrent of fuel until the landscape burned like a furnace. What the world saw was spectacular. What Moscow felt was systemic, a single impact that cascaded into a tactical collapse. The economics were ugly on paper, immediate repair estimates, lost inventory, but the real cost was operational. Routes cut, convoys delayed, air sorties replanned. A 2-drone operation, financed for a few $1,000s, had produced a strategic effect measured in billions. And then the ripples spread, from empty pumps to stopped tanks. The morning after, gas stations posted the same sign: no fuel. Lines that had once been routine turned into cues of panic. Military planners scrambled. Frontline units that had counted on a steady flow of diesel found supply windows suddenly closed. For a nation that prides itself on power projection, the optics were brutal. Not just a lost pipeline, but a loss of invulnerability. Politically, the strike landed like a slap. Commanders who'd boasted about impenetrable defenses watched videos of a drone slipping past their systems and found themselves answering questions they had no easy answers for. For Ukraine, the blow was both tactical and theatrical, a precision hit that damaged logistics and shattered confidence. For the rest of the world, it was a stark reminder that modern warfare increasingly rewards creativity over sheer firepower. Numbers help make the point. A few $1,000s in material, a meticulously planned deception, and a single night that cost an order of magnitude more than what it took to stage. But the deeper cost is harder to count. The shaken assumptions, the forced rethinking of supply lines and the psychological weight of vulnerability. So what do we call it? A brilliant raid? A humiliating failure? A turning point? Or simply one lesson in a new kind of war that small, cheap, and cunning can still beat big, expensive, and complacent? If you had to name this operation, what would you call it? Drop your best mission name in the comments.